because I said you're a captive audience, I have to take the opportunity to play my favourite coastal sound. And it's not a communication, it's a mechanical sound, and it's a shellfish eating. In fact, it's a limpet grazing. We see these mostly at low tide when they're stuck like limpets to rocks. But of course, at high tide, they rove around their little patch. And underneath them, underneath their bodies, they have a very hard tongue-like muscle called a radula, and they scrape the algae off the rocks. And as they're doing that, and this is a pair doing it in tandem, they produce this sound. So this is probably a first for King's Place. This is limpets grazing. With a lot of my work, certainly with the BBC Natural History Unit, I have the privilege and pleasure of travelling the world, often to quite remote places. And this is one of the comparisons that I wanted to make, because this really shocked and surprised me when I recorded it. It's two recordings of coral reefs, a healthy coral reef and a bleached coral reef, both recorded in the South China Seas within 100 kilometres of each other. And there was another project entirely I was working on, but we were travelling on a small boat between some islands, and I dropped my hydrophones out of the back of the boat and was trawling with them. And I picked up the sound of this reef. This is a healthy coral reef, which has this astonishing snap, crackle and pop of really loud sounds of crustaceans and fish communicating. This method is now used as a way of environmentally monitoring coral reefs, certainly in the barrier reef, and what remains of that. There are now hydrophones, but simply by measuring the volume and overall level of sound from a reef, and keeping that as a reference, scientists can tell if a reef's declining or becoming unhealthy or becoming bleached, simply because the volume of sound decreases on the reef. And I wanted to bring this to place because this is my direct experience of what happens when a reef declines. This is a healthy coral reef. Tens of thousands of animals, both the mechanical sound but also the communication of fish and small crustaceans. This is a reef very close to a shore with lots of human activity. This has been completely bleached. Same size coral reef, effectively. Which I think is a very good example of how we can tell what's happened to a place in acoustic monitoring. Just a few individual fish communicating. Last year, in fact, I was fortunate to make a podcast with David Waters, the producer, for The Guardian, called Oceans of Noise, about noise pollution in the seas and oceans, because it's so far not widely recognised that it's a significant problem. And one of the people I spoke to was Chris Clark, who was a brilliant marine biologist and bioacoustician, who was based at Cornell University in New York State. And he told me that during his 40-odd years of research, they have yet to discover a deaf sea animal. Everything in the oceans lives in a world of sound and vibrations, from the tiniest pistol shrimp in a rock pool in Northumberland to the songs of the largest and loudest animal which has ever lived, which is the blue whale. Everything lives in that world of sound and vibrations. And the noise pollution that we're putting into the oceans is having a really disorienting effect on some of those animals. Some of the larger whales have moved away from their breeding populations with a good food supply because they literally can't hear each other. And we had one location trip in making the podcast to Norway to work with the people from the Institute of Marine Research out of Bergen. Brilliant group of people. And one of the scientists there, Karen de Jong, was studying the sounds of cod and haddock because, believe it or not, they sing, and particularly when they're in mating pairs, they communicate with sound. A lot of fish, or nearly all fish, have a swim bladder, and around the swim bladder are a set of very powerful muscles, drum muscles, and the fish can contract these muscles very powerfully. And inside the swim bladder, it's partly filled with gas and liquid, and so it's sort of like going. It produces a sound when the drum muscles vibrate. And so Karen played us some of her recordings of cod, which are fairly quiet. This is from one of the lagoons. This is cod communicating, male cod grunting. Wait for it. And this one, these are haddock.